It's an early morning of February 24th, 2022. On the territory of Belarus, right near the Ukrainian border, the elements of the Russian 35th and 36th Combined Arms Armies are preparing for something that will later become known as the largest war in Europe since World War II. Altogether, the two armies include, but not limited to, units from the 36th, 37th, 38th and 64th Motor Rifle, the 31st and 11th Guards Airborne, 40th and 155th Marine, the 165th Artillery, the 107th Rocket Artillery, and the 5th Tank Brigades. An unknown number of soldiers from the Russian PMCs, such as Wagner and Redut, were also involved, as well as various Russian National Guard regiments. In total, it's somewhere between 35 to 50,000 troops, hundreds of tanks, IFVs, APCs, and other vehicles, as well as considerable amount of artillery. Pretty much any ground object in the north of Ukraine is within the range of the Russian attack aircraft, such as Su-25s, Su-24s, and Su-34s. 260s and 295 strategic bombers circle nearby, ready to launch dozens of cruise missiles. Fighter jets, such as modernized Su-27s, Su-30s, and Su-35s, are ready to achieve air superiority in the first hours of the invasion, operating from the bases of the Belarusian Air Force. Russia meticulously gathered its invasion force here for months, calling it a military exercise, and now they are ready to attack the heart of Ukraine, its capital, Kiev. Just minutes after the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, declares his special military operation, or simply full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russian bombers, as well as ground missile launchers, send over 100 cruise and ballistic missiles towards military objects across Ukraine. Air Force bases, ammunition depots, SAM sites, communication and command centers of the Ukrainian military are the priority targets. In Kyiv, missiles hit military and civilian objects inside the city, as well as three main airports around the capital and the Ukrainian Air Force base at Vasylkiv. Russian attack aircraft, armed with air-to-ground missiles, also crossed the Ukrainian border in multiple locations, operating from Belarus territory. They quickly get to the airfields to destroy Ukrainian Air Force on the ground and suppress air defenses that were not destroyed by missile strikes. Lieutenant General Anatoly Krivanoshko, the head of the Ukrainian Central Air Force Command, lies in a hospital bed in Kyiv on February 24th, recovering from severe coronavirus. At 5:15 am, when the first Russian missiles reach military infrastructure, he rushes from the hospital right to the Vasylkiv airfield near Kyiv. It's a base of the 40th Tactical Aviation and 138th Radiotechnical Air Defense Brigades that are responsible for defending the skies above the capital. Working remotely for the last couple of weeks, Lieutenant General managed to secretly relocate some fraction of the Ukrainian aviation and SAM systems in preparation for the Russian attack, but the strategic object is still in great danger. Upon arriving, Krivanoshko sees that the barracks of the 138th Radiotechnical Brigade are destroyed because the air raid sirens were not turned on. Miraculously, 50 people sleeping in it survived and are about to start operating designated air defense systems. Meanwhile, Vyacheslav Rodionov is the first fighter pilot of the 40th Tactical Aviation Brigade that manages to get to his miraculously undamaged MiG-29 fighter. He races the jet into the skies and sees that multiple Russian attack aircraft are approaching to finish the missile's job. He engages in air combat with invaders, buying time for the rest of the pilots. The whole brigade, which has around 16 MiG-29s, successfully gets into the air, rendering useless the attempts to destroy them on the ground. While distracting the enemy and covering other pilots, Vyacheslav Rodionov was shot down by the Russian fighter jet. He will be posthumously awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine and Golden Star Medal. For the weeks from now on, Ukrainian pilots fly 3 to 4 sorties a day to engage Russian Air Force that outnumbers them 10 to 1, Krivanoshko later says in the interview. They often skip pre-flight checks and take off from shortened runways that have been just repaired overnight after being damaged. This, however, does not prevent Russian military command from reporting that all Ukrainian air defenses, as well as Air Force, are destroyed on the first day of the invasion. Such false information will hurt invaders more than defenders, as it creates a false impression of safety for the Russian Air Force in contested airspace. In reality, Ukrainians suffer significant losses but still contest the skies over the whole area of the country. On February 24th only, 3 more pilots of the 40th Tactical Aviation Brigade do not come back from their missions of the patrol in the skies above the capital. For their actions, each of the MiG-29 pilots, Vyacheslav Yurko, Roman Pasulka, and Volodymyr Kohansky, will be posthumously awarded the title of Hero of Ukraine and the Golden Star Medal. This also applies to all other pilots that lost their lives while defending the capital. Worth noting that the 39th Brigade of the Tactical Aviation from Ozerny Air Base in the nearby Zhytomyr region was also fighting in the skies of the capital and lost one MiG-29 piloted by Eduard Walharovsky and L-39 piloted by Dmytro Kolomeets. At 7 am on February 24th, a scheduled shift change for the workers of the Chernobyl power plant was cancelled, as they were informed that Russia has launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That morning, there were around 300 people within the exclusion zone, including nuclear staff, medical staff, firefighters, 169 National Guard of Ukraine soldiers, and 4 tourists. A few hours later, elements of the Russian 35th Combined Arms Army, that has been stationed in Belarus, crossed the Ukrainian border in multiple locations. At the same time, elements of the 36th Combined Arms Army attacked Chernihiv and also moved towards Kyiv on the western bank of the Dnipro River. Without much resistance, by 2 p.m., Russians encircled the notorious Chernobyl nuclear power plant and its administrative buildings. The National Guard units stationed on the territory of the power plant are severely outnumbered, so they set up improvised barricades and wait for what will happen next. In the following hours, it becomes clear that no reinforcements will arrive, since they are in the middle of the 2,600 square kilometers exclusion zone, with no Ukrainian forces even remotely close to them. National Guard commanders and the staff administration are also responsible for the safety of a nuclear power plant, so they negotiate the surrender with the Russian forces to prevent damage to the facility. The Ukrainian 80th Air Assault Brigade was the closest one to the exclusion zone. However, as it becomes clear that Chernobyl fell, the Ukrainian troops retreat behind Uch River and blow up 2 bridges over it. This allows units of the 80th Brigade to hold much more numerous Russian forces and choose a more favorable place to meet the enemy. Understanding that invaders will quickly set up pontoon bridges, they come up with a plan of defending the city of Ivankiv, as it's likely the next target. Worth noting that Russian electronic warfare systems were crippling Ukrainian communications during the first days of the invasion, so many military units of the defenders had to act almost independently. Simultaneously with the attack on Chernobyl, at 9:30 am on February 24th, more than 30 low-flying attack and transport helicopters crossed the Ukrainian border and travel towards Kiev above the Dnipro River. Their mission is to capture Hostomel airport just 10 kilometers from the capital. The units of the Elite 76 Guards Air Assault Brigade must arrive on the 18 IL-76 strategic airlifters and enter Kyiv in the decapitating attack that would end organized resistance of the Ukrainians. Suffering losses of 2 helicopters due to Ukrainian air defense on their way, an air raid group arrives and attacks Hostomel airport, performing a drop-off of between 200 and 300 men from the Russian 31st Guards Airborne Assault and 11 separate Guards Air Assault Brigades. Surprisingly for the invaders, the Ukrainian 4th Special Rapid Reaction Brigade, as well as other units stationed on the territory of the airport, shot down 6 more helicopters and resist long enough to allow units of the Ukrainian 72nd Mechanized Brigade, 80th and 95th Separate Airborne Brigades to deploy and encircle Hostomel Airport at approximately 3:30 p.m. The runway was heavily damaged by intense air and artillery strikes, rendering the initial plan of deploying the 76th Guards Air Assault Brigade near the city using IL-76 aircraft impossible. In particular, Ukrainians strike the airport with bombs from at least 2 Su-24 aircraft of the 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade, losing 1 plane and 2 pilots in it, Dmitry Kulikov and Nikolai Savchuk. The Ukrainian counterattack forces Russian VDV that were holding Hostomel airport to retreat into nearby forests and fields, so the Russian military command has to come up with a new plan for how to take the airfield again and save the remaining VDV troops near Kyiv. They also abort the mission of delivering more forces into the area by air, and all the planes which departed from Pskov landed in Belarus. The Russian forces in these planes now invade Ukraine by land. On the second day of the invasion, Russian forces continue their blitzkrieg towards Kyiv. The pontoon bridges over the Ush River allow moving forces that took over Chernobyl deeper into Ukraine, so a convoy of the 5th Separate Guards Tank and 155th Separate Marine Brigades that move from the northwest plans to meet with Russian National Guard units that move from the northeast in the town of Ivankiv. Near the city, they plan to secure another key bridge, this time across the Teteriv River. Ukrainians set up ambushes on the forests and roads around Ivankiv to inflict maximum casualties for the enemy. In one of the documented examples, T-64s and BMP-1s of the 80th Air Assault Brigade, as well as troops with British-made Enloy TGMs, attacked the enemy on the circular intersection near the bridge. Invaders sustain first casualties and have to regroup, waiting for reinforcements.
Все, надходит!
However, north of Ivankiv, the Russian National Guard was also ambushed and halted. Ukrainians, however, have neither enough men nor enough vehicles to effectively push back the enemy, so a column of invaders eventually bypasses Ivankiv and moves towards Kiev. Shortly after that, the bridge across Teteriv River is blown up by Ukrainians to prevent more forces from getting across. After that, Russians also advance to the west of Ivankiv to secure another bridge in Kukhari village, but it's also quickly blown up. The skirmishes around the town continue till February 27th, when the Ukrainians have to completely retreat from Ivankiv, taking the positions to the west of it. Russians set up pontoon river crossings, but their carrying capacity is quite low, which creates first logistical issues. The forces that broke through Ivankiv on February 25th consisted mostly of the 5th Tank Brigade, reinforced with OMON and SOBR, which are special police units integrated with Russian National Guard. It's still unclear if the deployment of the Russian anti-riot police on the spearhead of the attack was a strategic blunder or a sign of confidence that Kyiv will imminently fall and it will be necessary to suppress protests inside the capital right away. Another interesting military unit that moved in this column was the 131st Special Motorized Regiment, which is essentially a personal army of Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of the Chechen Republic in Russia. Even though these forces are officially integrated into National Guard, they acted more independently and by many accounts had special mission of assassinating the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Knowing that from intelligence, President of Ukraine, however, stays in the capital, declining multiple offers from allies to evacuate him to the other country or just even to the western part of Ukraine.
Я тут, ніяку зброю ми не складемо, будемо захищати нашу державу, тому що наша зброя – це наша правда. Наша правда в тому, що це наша земля, наша країна, наші діти, і ми все це будемо захищати.
This decision is also crucial for the defense of Kyiv, as it shows the unity of the government, armed forces, and common citizens in the face of existential danger. This pivotal moment is summarized in Zelensky's phrase said to the US representatives: "The fight is here. I need ammunition, not a right." On February 25th, the convoy that bypassed Ivankiv travels on the PO2 highway to Fenivichi, and then splits to take control over Dimir, Demidiv, Borodyanka, and eventually Hostomel airport. Soon, Russian forces reach Dvizhivka. Then, they push Ukrainians out of Hostomel airport, turning it into their forward operating base for an advance into Kyiv. The airport, however, is constantly attacked by Ukrainian artillery of the 43rd Artillery Brigade, 72nd Mechanized Brigade, and 128th Assault Brigade, which causes significant Russian casualties there. At 8 am on February 25th, one part of the Eastern Convoy, which almost exclusively consisted of the above-mentioned OMON and SOBR units from the Russian city of Kemerovo, suddenly finds themselves in the head of the column due to miscommunication. The force of approximately 80 men turned out to be behind the enemy lines as they missed the turn to Hostomel airport. However, all instructions that they received were go to Kyiv, and we will tell you what to do when you get there. So the column continues its way right into the capital. As the convoy crosses Irpin River, chaos erupts when the artillery shells start exploding around. Mortar shells rain down as well, anti-tank missiles streak through the air, and hailstorm of bullets unleashes from all directions. Russian forces got right into the ambush of city defenders, who tear apart lightly armed trucks from well-hidden positions near the road. As the head vehicle of the column is disabled, Russians have nothing to do but jump out. Eventually, no vehicles survive the ambush, and only 3 out of approximately 80 Russian special police operatives survive in this short battle. They are taken as prisoners by Ukrainian forces, and this story is told from their testimonies. Unlike the convoy which headed to the capital because of poor communication and command, many sabotage and reconnaissance groups enter Kyiv during the day and night with special missions. They travel on civilian cars and even Ukrainian vehicles captured in Chernobyl, with the intent to destabilize the situation by creating a false impression that the major Russian forces are already in the city. Territorial Defense Forces, more specifically 112th, 114th, and 231st Territorial Defense Brigades, fight back, but in total mayhem, friendly fire incidents are also common. Many Russian saboteurs that were sent to Kyiv before the war are also activated. Critical situation in the capital forced the Ukrainian government to distribute guns to anyone who can prove their citizenship. A risky move that eventually paid off, as by the end of the day, defenders liquidated over 60 saboteurs. From a political standpoint, the fact that people are willing to defend the state from an attack instead of turning weapons against it demonstrates the unity between the government and its citizens in support of defense efforts. Therefore, the chaos that erupted with the arrival of saboteurs soon disappears, as full control of the city is in the hands of its residents, who are now armed and ready to defend Kyiv. 2 Ukrainian special units, the separate Presidential Brigade and the 101st Guards Brigade of the General Staff, which are responsible for defending the President and the highest military command, are also deployed to the outskirts of Kyiv to prevent infiltration attempts. They will engage in the battles around the capital, even though they were created as more security-centered and ceremonial part of the military. In addition, on February 25th, Russian fighter aircraft began bombarding central Kyiv. Missile barrage also reaches buildings in the residential areas. In the skies above the capital, a Ukrainian Su-27, piloted by Alexander Oksanchenko, nicknamed Grey Wolf, a famous displayed pilot who came back from retirement to defend Ukraine, was shot down while diverting the attack. The great loss, however, also proves the fact that Ukraine Air Force continues to defend the country against all the odds. During the night of February 25th and morning of February 26th, Russian sabotage groups infiltrate the city of Vasylkiv, most likely to disable the airbase of the Ukrainian Air Force. Many sources mention Russian paratroopers that landed there, and a few shot down Il-76 airlifters that were carrying them. Considering the fact that there is no evidence of downed planes of this type in the area, is highly unlikely. The saboteurs rather used the chaos and gaps in defenses to attack the airbase west of Kyiv in small groups. By some accounts, Vasylkiv was infiltrated by Alpha Group, one of the FSB special operation units. In the town, they faced stiff resistance of the local territorial defense forces, 138th Special Purpose Center Regiment, and military airfield staff of the 40th Tactical Aviation Brigade. The newly formed Azov Territorial Defense Unit also arrives from Kyiv and joins city defenders, so the invaders are forced to retreat from the town by the end of the day. On the morning of February 27th, a convoy of Russian vehicles more than 4.8 kilometers long was seen on satellite images heading towards Ivankiv. By February 28th, the convoy will grow to around 64 kilometers. Over 2,000 tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, infantry mobility vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and supply trucks are effectively stuck on the roads, as muddy fields look like even worse alternative to travel on. This happens because Russia exhausted its immediate stockpiles of pontoon bridges and needs time to find and deliver more to the front lines, to expand carrying capacity and replace destroyed ones. The troops, which are essentially stuck in the huge traffic jams, start suffering from shortages of food, fuel and ammunition. The auxiliary supply columns that take the tours are usually ambushed by Ukrainian forces, who, in a matter of days, have managed to turn the greatest Russian strength, which is the number of vehicles and men, into their greatest weakness. Fragile supply lines and accumulations of vehicles are also attacked by Ukrainian Air Force, which destroys whole columns of armor with Su-24 and Su-25 ground attack aircraft. However, not without losses. Su-25, code 39 Blue, operated by 299th Tactical Aviation Brigade, was shot down near the village of Khlibivka. The pilot, Gennady Matulyak, did not survive. By the morning of February 27th, the Russians finally accumulated what they saw as necessary amount of forces for breaking through Bucha, Irpin and Hostomel and entering Kiev. They launched an attack on Hostomel first, with units of the elite 31st Guards Air Assault Brigade and Chechen 131st Motorized Regiment. Russian troops entered the city and engaged in urban warfare with the Ukrainian 80th and 79th Air Assault Brigades, Georgian Legion, Territorial Defense Brigades, and various special operation units. Part of the Chechen forces, which were supposed to assassinate the president of Ukraine, were also ambushed in Hostomel by Ukrainian Special Operation Forces. Controlling about half of Hostomel, as of February 27th, Russians attacked the nearby town of Bucha. The defenders prepared for this and tried to blow up the only bridge linking the two towns, but failed due to a small number of explosives available. The assault is executed by units of the 76th Guards Air Assault and 7th Guards Mountain Air Assault Divisions, and the above-mentioned Chechen 141st Motorized Regiment. Against them were volunteers who just joined 114th Territorial Defense Brigade, while uniting their efforts around local professional military officers in retirement. The Ukrainian armed forces were still busy holding much more numerous Russian troops to the east and west, so Bucha residents will start the battle almost alone. Out of 20 people, the vast majority have no combat experience, except for 2 professional soldiers, 5 Donbass war veterans, and 1 police officer. Their plan is simple: disperse in small groups around the intersection near Novos supermarket, ambush the enemy, inflict as much damage as possible, and retreat. Around 7 am, the column of around 150 vehicles, including armored personnel carriers, tanks, trucks, patrol tankers, and bridging vehicles, crosses the bridge and enters Bucha. Then, around 50 vehicles follow Vokzalna Street, while the majority of them, around 100 vehicles, turn on the left and try to bypass town to get to Kyiv. The first vehicle flies past the intersection at high speed. A Ukrainian grenadier spontaneously chooses the third vehicle and scores a direct hit. His job is done, so he retreats. Since he was shooting from under the local monument of international soldiers, Russians opened fire at the non-operational BRDM-2 armored scout car that was part of the monument. As the convoy was forced to stop, 4 other intersection defenders throw Molotov cocktails at the vehicles inside the convoy from behind the fences, and one of the infantry fighting vehicles catches fire. Convoy immediately switches their attention to those 4, wounding one of them. The second group of the defenders opens fire with small arms from the other side of the street, diverting attention and allowing the first group to retreat with the wounded man. Then the second group breaks contact and jumps into the car, retreating as well, while unsuccessfully being chased by Russian APCs. Moving more carefully, the Russians continue their advance towards Irpin. This slowdown, however, allows Ukrainians to prepare for the next ambush. The above-mentioned group of defenders overtakes the Russian column using their knowledge of the town and quickly gets to the Giraffe shopping center on the border of Irpin and Bucha. There, they finally meet the reinforcements of around 70 men, which are a wild combination of local volunteers, including the Irpin mayor, National Guard soldiers, the armed forces, and the 8th Separate Special Forces Regiment. The group blocked the street with a bulldozer and cement mixer, setting up machine gun nests and hiding APCs on the sides of the road. Together, they ambushed the first Russian vehicle at 9 am with a grenade launcher and opened fire with all weapons that they have, while the Russians tried to back up and maneuver on the narrow street. Some invaders tried to outflank Ukrainians to the brick factory, but ultimately failed. The others hid in the shopping mall, while the European defenders start moving towards the enemy. Russians, who started backing up early, almost escape, but the artillery of the Ukrainian 128th Assault Brigade finally gets coordinates from the Irpin defenders and targets the column, demolishing the bridge that links Bucha and Irpin. TB2 Bayraktar drones also score a couple of hits on the vehicles in the column. In addition, the practically stalled convoy is also attacked by 2 Ukrainian Su-24 bombers. On the way back after dropping their bombs, a plane with a call sign White 77 from the 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade was shot down. The pilots, Ruslan Belarus and Roman Dovhaluk, did not survive. Out of over 50 Russian vehicles, only a few returned back to Hostomel airport. The Vokzalna Street became the graveyard for over 100 elite Russian VDV soldiers who were stopped due to efforts of volunteers from Bucha.
Україні! Героям слава! Третя наша трофейна. Красавчики, молодці! Це їм наваляли, блін. Господи, вчора це все ціленьке вилазки. Ай, блин, не успели мы, пацана, блин. Не успели чуть-чуть. Дивіться, ви тільки подивіться. Люди просто мирно жили, нікого не чіпали. Прийшли оці тварюки. Вона спалила оцю їхню БМД-ху. А там наша Буча. Ми все повернемо. Горіти буде земля під ними, тварі. Прості люди, не військові, б'ються за свою землю. Слава Україні!
The first blitz attack on Kiev outskirt towns has failed. The main reason for that are lack of reconnaissance and overconfidence of elite Russian VDV units, who disregarded all the complexity of urban warfare in their initial plans. Invaders, however, learn and adjust their tactics, using their advantage in artillery and aviation to slowly grind into the towns instead of trying to rush through them in convoys. The progress, however, is still unsatisfactory, so a big fraction of Russian forces are thrown to the western flank, where their columns enter Borodyanka. After brief skirmishes, most likely with territorial defense forces and small groups of armed forces of Ukraine, they continue their way towards M06 highway, which connects Kyiv to another big city called Zhytomyr. It becomes clear that they plan to encircle the capital and cut out the supply lines of the defenders to facilitate the city assault.